Welcome to Access, made possible by Smart Insiders. I'm your host, Luke Frazier. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's get the show started. Video gaming addiction is real, and there are lots of consequences and characteristics associated with it. Because Smart Recovery deals with all kinds of addictions, we can help. Today on the program, we're going to talk to someone who has received help from Smart and will tell us about his video gaming addiction. His name is Alex, and he decided that he'd like to only use his first name. So, welcome to the program, Alex.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, tell me a little bit about growing up and where you grew up and how you ended up. You're currently in on the West Coast.
Yes, I'm in LA.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I grew up on the East Coast mostly, in New York and like Long Island as well a little bit. And then I gradually moved west. But yeah, grew up there, and had a great time. Basically until I was like 15, and then I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then out here to Los Angeles.
Okay. So you basically gradually, one state at a time, you move west. Is that was that the
Well,
rate?
I mean, yeah, I skipped over a bunch of them, obviously.
Good.
No fault to those states. I don't know you very well, but Santa Fe was wonderful. I loved Santa Fe in New Mexico.
Yeah, I've been there. It's a beautiful city. A lot of good art and food, and a lot of fun stuff to do.
Yeah, they have something like the most galleries per capita, I think, is Santa Fe in like any city in America. It's crazy.
Of course, and it's Georgia O'Keeffe territory too.
That's right.
That's good. Well, let's get into the subject of the podcast, your gaming addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But before we really delve into kind of what has happened and what kinds of help you've gotten from Smart, tell me just a little bit of the attraction of gaming to you. Or first, tell me the history and what you first started gaming, what kind of games, and then what was that initial attraction?
Well, I initially got into video gaming when I was 2 years old. So it's been a long time, and I'm 40 now, so 38 years of gaming. Yeah, it was my dad bought me a little video game system called the Vectrex, which nobody remembers. It had its own little monitor built in, which was a vector monitor, which is like different from a usual television in that it's kind of like the laser light show, where it draws lines and keeps drawing them in order to maintain like a certain, picture.
Okay.
And it's black and white, and you would take little color transparencies for each game and put them on the screen. And so you pretend that it was color.
Yeah. You're probably not old enough to remember that when televisions first came out, they color TV consisted of putting a filter right over the screen.
Well, there you go. It was like that. It was, and I was so happy because it was my own little toy in my room, and the monitor was, like not like about yay big or something. And yeah, I played it all the time. And then gradually I got a Sega Master System, which was just before the Genesis, if you know your video games at all. I got that when I was about 6 or 7. Then I got a Sega Genesis, which I had for a long time, including the Sega Genesis, the Sega CD, the Sega 32X. I got a Nintendo at my mother's house because my parents are divorced. So I had the Nintendo at my mom's house and the Sega at my dad's.
Okay.
And then the Super Nintendo. And then gradually I moved to Sony PlayStation 2, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I'm listening to you provide pretty detailed information about the gaming systems you had that you can remember, going back, and even the models or such. But hey, did you?
I can make it a lot more detailed.
Okay,
if you want,
all right. That's the sense I had. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the sense I had. That was kind of an overview. But did you wish you had the same system at your mom's house and your dad's house, or was that good to have a variety?
Oh, I wanted all of it. I wanted to experience all of them. And it just happened that way. because I had the Sega on lock at my dad's house. And then my mom, I was like, well, I need a video game over here because I'm hooked on them. So
okay.
I used my pocket money to get that Nintendo Entertainment System that like everybody had. And in fact, I remember I had to save up, and there was a game. I had an Apple IIe, and there was a game on it that I really wanted to get, and it was $50. And my mom said, if you buy that, it's going to take half your savings towards the Nintendo. And I thought long and hard about it, and I bought it, and the game sucked. And I was really frustrated. Yeah. So I thought, oh man, I got to wait another like X amount of weeks, saving up my allowance to get the Nintendo. So I was pretty burned as a little kid. I was mad.
So it sounds like, did you consider from kind of the early age that more was better? The more games you had, the more systems you could access, the better.
Yeah. I mean, just wanting to play all different games all the time, and games that I would come back to and play more. So, it was, I mean, there was a lot of games out there, but there also wasn't nearly the same amount as there are now. It was kind of like almost like going back to, like I'm also a DJ. And so one of the things, I read this book on the history of DJs, and they talk about how in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, with like DJ culture getting started, that there just weren't as many releases. So you had DJs playing more similar things because like there just weren't that many records out there. So you couldn't be
smaller range of content, really.
Right. So nowadays there's so much indie games and smaller games and different companies and all this stuff that you have so many options of gaming that there's no way to like be on top of everything. But then, you could theoretically get a lot of the games that, were out and get to play most of them,
Okay. So you could have more of the market share.
Yeah, I guess, or just more of the experience that everyone was experiencing.
Okay.
Like if your friend was playing a game, you could theoretically you'd be talking about the same game as kids because it was like the new game that was out and everyone wanted to get that one.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, it sounds to me, just to relate it to television for a second, before streaming and, television on demand, video on demand, we were watching the same programs. You would go into school, I remember, or work and talk about what you had seen Sunday night.
It's like the water cooler talk,
right? That's
like
cliche, right? Now
you're having that shared experience,
right?
And you could also, as a kid, you'd borrow a game from your friend. That was a big thing, to loan the game out after you like got most of your experience out of it, and then talk to them about like how they had it and stuff.
That's right. Let me ask you, Alex, when did you first realize that it was kind of an issue for you, that you really wanted to do it so much it became really a maybe overwhelming part of your life?
Well, it kind of always was a part of my life, and like a big part of my life, because when you do something since you're 2 years old, and it just feels like one of those things where you're just expected to grow out of it. You're just expected to find natural boundaries with the behavior, and that when you get older and you get busier, then it's like, okay, well, I'll just do this less or not at all. And the perception then was just not at all. Like older people don't really play video games a lot,
So you give it up in a sense, that somehow there was a natural course of progression of the interest.
It's almost like with like binge drinking or something like that with college, where it's like this expectation of like, if you got really messed up in college, just drinking every night or whatever, that you would just figure out, okay, now it's time to stop. And, I go on and have a healthy relationship with it. And that doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes people don't have a healthy relationship with it, and they can't find it when they're supposed to,
Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, those relationships, of course, with all sorts of behaviors and substances, and this sense of there would be a way to give it up with just a decision, can be kind of problematic itself.
It's very reductive, to the people that are going through that struggle. You think of like the old like just say no to drugs type
No,
of
right,
thing, where it's
right.
like, oh, you just got to say no. Oh, cool. I got
No,
it. Thanks.
right.
Thanks
Ridiculous.
for
Ridiculous.
understanding.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that clearly, and it just always struck me as just ridiculous.
Well, one of the funny things about the reason I bring that up is like it's been hammered into my brain, because when you would go to arcades in the like 80s and 90s, the government had a regulation where it had to flash on the screen, winners say no to drugs.
Oh
And
boy.
as like a public service, and it was like only in the US,
Oh,
and it would
geez.
have the little presidential seal like as a flash screen that they would do when you would be in the arcades. You'd see it on the game, like every game.
Well, that makes people feel better, like they're doing something, and there's not so much attention paid to
Yeah.
the actual impact or lack thereof.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, with gaming, it was something that I just thought, and there wasn't really a perception then that you could really be addicted to gaming. Behavioral addictions are always a little bit of a harder job to convince people of, that like you could be addicted to it, that it's not some sort of like substance that you're hooked on. But yeah, it's just like as I got into college and got through with college, one of the things you learn is that as much as people are, concerned for you and want
who became,
your,
excuse me, who became concerned first, or who
well,
expressed
just
that
like,
concern?
family, friends, but no one was particularly like thinking like, oh, video gaming is a problem for you, you need to stop. It was always like, well, what are you doing with your life? And gradually I found myself, kind of living my life in a certain way as to minimize responsibilities and certain things that I would need to do, and also that I could just keep playing, that I could keep gaming and escaping from this world, and
Right.
into
That
a world
sounds
where
like
it's
a
fun.
opportunity cost. I mean,
Yeah,
it may not have
that's a
been
good word for
a direct negative result or consequence, and maybe there was some of those as well, but it's more opportunities that may be given up.
Yeah, very much so. And then you look around and you realize, years have gone by, and what do I have to show for it? I have a life that I've made very simple in a sort of way in order to facilitate just being able to throw hours and hours of my life away on something that doesn't really matter.
Well, you've structured your life in a certain
Yeah.
way, and
Yeah.
at
And then you
some
look
point,
around and your friends have kids and they have a relationship and they have a career, and you've just been kind of coasting, for ages.
yeah,
That functioning addict, right? Where it's like
right.
you made it real easy to keep that other thing going because you've given up a lot of other things for your one thing.
We have heard those terms often about functioning, and I know Smart doesn't use labels, but let's say we use the label alcoholic. Someone once said, you know what, there's no such thing as that. It's a substance misuser with a job. I mean, that's the bottom line. That we tend to think that if someone still has a job, then they're functioning, but that's just such a small part of a person's life, really.
Yeah. I think back to maybe like 15 years ago, I think it was about, I was playing a video game called World of Warcraft,
Okay.
which is an online game. So you have, it's an online role-playing game. So you make a character and you play online, and you pay a monthly subscription to play it. And everyone else is playing it too, so they can like team up with you and do quests and things like that. The big problem with the game is it's designed to never end. So, because they want you to keep playing.
Sure.
Sure. So you beat the game, and then the end game content starts, which is what the real game is. Okay. And so it involves, working on quests to get like a little bit better weapons and armor. And, it has all these sneaky little tricks, sort of making you feel like you accomplished something. Well, I leveled up.
Right. I mean, in a benign sense, it's encouragement, but in a more nefarious sense, it's keeping your eyes on the screen, involved with the game, and then ultimately, in some way, commercializing it and having you participate on a commercial level.
Very much so. I mean, that's that's part of it. But and also just that like you start to, and this became kind of the way I started using gaming for a long time after that, was somebody mentioned it in an article. He used the term shadow career, which was a very it really resonated with me, of like that you're in this other world where you're accomplishing things and you're responsible and you're doing all this stuff and like getting little pats on the back and little dings of achievement. And then you go back to the real world and you haven't done any of that. So it's hard.
You haven't gotten the pats on the back, or you haven't done something that deserves.
You haven't done something that's like amounted to anything.
Okay.
But you think to yourself, like when I would play World of Warcraft, I think, oh, I leveled up my blacksmithing. I got that sword. I got that shield. And it's like, wait a minute. You didn't do anything. You sat in front of a video game and wasted 12 hours.
So you're not equating, or you are, at least initially, equating achievements in the video game world with the real world. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, it's almost like in the Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when he's got the bag of sand and the gold skull. It's like that switch happens and you don't even really realize it. You get that. It's like you scratch an itch in your mind of like, you feel like you did something. And also you feel like you socialized, but it's just, typing text to somebody else that's also playing the game. And there is an element of socializing with that, but it's really not the same as, actually spending time with somebody and doing something.
It can't be. There's a construct there. There's something that is created artificially. Real people design and make the games,
and also it was like, I didn't even want to know too much about that person. It was like we were both users, and it was just like, let's just do this thing. I don't really want to know about your life, but because we're just both using. I don't know. Some people use it for cool social stuff, and sure. They have healthy boundaries with it. I just definitely didn't.
Right. Well, and that's the case with substance use itself, is there's healthy use. So there can be something that works and doesn't impact those areas of your life. And then something different. But let me go through a couple things I was reading about, of course, gaming addiction and preparation. But let me ask you, for these characteristics, whether it's something that applies to you. Thinking about it all the time.
Yeah, I used to.
Yeah, definitely. Right. I know you're addressing it right now. Feel bad when you can't play more, like more and more is needed.
Yeah. And you start to, especially because like as I got older, a lot of the games, as I said, that I was playing were very much focused on like progression and like achievement of things, like a single player, big campaign, long game. And I would think, oh, I got to get this done. Like I gotta do that quest. I got to level up this guy. I got to do this thing. And it was the priority
that becomes your goal. I mean, your goal in life.
Somebody said in a smart meeting, and this was very, very intelligent, was, there's like two states of an addict sometimes. And it's when you're doing your addiction and when you're figuring out how to get to back to doing
There you go. So you're focusing on it. You're really obsessed with it, you could say.
Yeah. How do I get back into that world? Because this other world doesn't work for me right now.
So does that mean, and another characteristic I was reading about, you're not able to do things you used to like to do, like giving up stuff? Maybe that's the opportunity cost we spoke of earlier.
Yeah. Well, you start evaluating from, an addicted standpoint, which was like, do I really want to go out and hang out with friends, or do I want to just keep doing this thing that, gives me these dopamine hits and, doesn't judge me. And like, as you do it more and more, doesn't realize like that I'm gaining weight. I look tired. I don't have anything to talk about with these people that are like living their lives,
who are not game users.
Yeah. They just, or they might, but they might be able to talk with you a little bit about it, but they see how obsessed you are.
Okay.
And it's you, I would have to hold back, obviously, because it was like, I don't want to dump this on somebody. Yeah. It's just like that obsessive addict talk where becomes your whole personality.
Right. Well, let's switch gears now and go to kind of how you're addressing it now and the kinds of things you've been able to do in your experience with smart recovery. How did you first learn about smart recovery?
I first learned about smart recovery. I was seeing a therapist for a long time, and she kept trying to get me to go to any sort of meetings to, just to address the problems and get some help
Hmm.
rather than just, trying hard
Right.
to stop. And it started off with going to 12-step programs a little bit, but on trying to find a 12-step program that resonated particularly with like a gaming addiction,
Hmm.
a video gaming addiction. So I started off, I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and then tried to get some answers from them. They referred me to a gambling anonymous
Hmm.
meeting
Hmm.
that I went to, found a little bit more resonance with that. And I would also say that younger people maybe struggling with some parts of video gaming addiction could find more resonance with gambling treatment, because
Hmm.
there's a big gambling element in some of the online games
Hmm.
now.
Sure. Video poker and all sorts of things is just being
Yeah,
obvious.
but also just loot boxes and things like that, like for games that are like free to play, but then you have to purchase things inside the game with real
Hmm.
money.
Okay.
It can
What'd
be
you
a
call that?
big
Loot boxes?
loot boxes is one
Okay.
of the terms for it, where it's like you buy something for your character or whatever that you don't know what's in the box, but like it could help you. And so like
Mm,
that mystery of,
yeah. Taking a chance, taking a
yeah, and
gamble.
opening it up, it's
Right.
gambling, and they've regulated it as such in parts of Europe, I believe now, because there's a lot of kids, with mom and dad's credit card that are just chasing that dragon, going
Hmm.
after box, and all of a sudden they're thousands of dollars in
Mm,
on this game that means nothing.
yeah. Yeah. So that leads to negative consequences, not just for the kid, but for the family. I
Of
mean,
course.
financial consequences.
And think about if that addict is not a kid and they're
Hmm.
doing it, it's like there's no one to stop them.
Hmm.
It's just them hitting, the red side of their bank account.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah.
if it's a credit card, there's only Visa to stop once you hit that limit, or you
Hmm.
can't, or you just keep getting late
It's
fees, and
rough.
it
It
becomes a big issue. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, anyway, so yeah, I went to the Gamblers Anonymous meeting, found a little more resonance there, but still didn't really like it. And then I tried a meeting I found called like, I think it was called like moderation, something about moderation, which was interesting about like trying to live with it. That had some resonance for me too. But then I found smart. And I think one of the things that really resonated for me about smart is that, it's about empowerment,
Hmm.
and it's about, taking yourself and, strengthening yourself against what you've been doing. Because so much of my gaming was just throwing myself away, feeling like
Hmm.
I wasn't worth it, like
Hmm.
that this was all I was going to be good for. And, being able to have some tools, in your toolbox to say like, maybe let's, like riding out an urge,
Hmm. Hmm.
saying, okay, if I can just wait maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just anything, if I can just delay this, maybe
Hmm.
I can get through it, and I never really thought about that as, you know, when I was younger, because it just always felt so inevitable.
Yeah. Well, that's the part of the Smarts 4-point program, coping with those urges,
Hmm.
and managing the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors,
Yeah.
and the motivation for that. And that is the self-empowering approach,
Hmm.
as opposed to in 12-step tradition, I am powerless over this.
Hmm.
And something else needs to lift me and give me power as opposed to myself.
Also, like the way that Smart talks about addiction is so much more, at least for me, I found a lot more resonance in the nuance
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
degrees
Hmm.
of addiction, where it's like, like they say, like, Eskimos have like 100 different words for snow
Right.
or
Right.
something like that. It's like,
Hmm.
why do we only have, gameaholic or alcoholic? Why do we
Hmm.
only have one word?
Hmm.
So that was such a much more healthy approach for me, because it told me, like, this is a problem, but you don't have to be completely, chained to this term or something like that. You can
labeled. It's a label,
yeah.
and it can be stigmatizing.
And you can have like a degree, and you see with the smart recovery meetings, you see people with different degrees of need and addiction to something particular, and different approaches to helping them, rather than just like, we are going to read this thing, and then this one person will share, and then you must do this program. And it's like, it's like they're not listening. They're not listening to what these people need and how they can help themselves, because they're the ones ultimately that know the help they truly need.
Yeah. Well, it puts people in a box. It says, here's your parameters. But SMART, because of its practical nature, because of its, very much based on cognitive behavioral therapy, we know our own minds. We know our behaviors. Once we accept that there's an issue here, and then we choose, we have motivation, and then there's commitment. And do you feel like you're in a good place right now, Alex, with how you're dealing with do you play games still?
Well, I only play games with other people, and like, because for me, gaming was always a solitary problem, and particular types of games as I got older, more so, where I would, just get into like a single player game that was a long thing that maybe didn't have an ending, or was like I was playing a video game called BattleTech, which is all about big giant robots like fighting each other. And it's basically like, it's a turn-based game. So it's like a board game sort of that you play with the computer. And there are all these mods. Mods are something that people change the game. Like fans of the game
modifications, would that be okay?
But like, they change the game in certain ways to make it longer or better or just more refined. And I got really into playing this one, and I put thousands of hours into it. I was playing a lot of these strategy games where you can kind of sit back and do turn-based stuff, and it's very much like progression and like achievement and that kind of shadow career feeling. So when I go to spend time with friends, and I don't have a lot of friends that really play games that much anymore, we'll just maybe play a little bit, like a 2-player game, or some sort of story game that will play one person will play, and we'll kind of like talk and experience it. But that has an ending to it. Like, that is a boundary where, we play for a little bit, if we play at all, and, then we stop. And that was important, like a different way to experience gaming for me, which I don't feel the same, problems with, because I'm not using it in the same way I was using my addiction.
Sure. You mentioned you said the word boundaries, and that's something that you've thought through and are real big for you. Are there others that go to SMART, as far as you're aware, or the meetings you go to, that are struggling or addressing gaming addiction?
There was only one guy that he had problems with marijuana mostly, but that extended into gaming when he was getting high. But for the most part, it's just been me. But the nice thing about SMART is that you do have a variety of people coming to SMART with different problems.
Right.
And yet it still all resonates for the most part. You can find, your experience and other people's experiences pretty easily. And there is, especially because there's, you find people with behavioral, addictions rather than just substance.
Right.
And it's very helpful, and you get a little bit of perspective sometimes on you not seeing it a certain way.
Well, that's the mutual support aspect, and you're right. It's about the behavior, not the person. Not your identity is only a person who has a video gaming addiction. It's a person with a certain behavior who's now addressing that behavior, getting some help to do it, but also being self-empowered. And that's what SMART, I think, is most effective doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. As we begin to wrap up here, I did want to mention something I read about a study in Oxford, an Oxford study in England. Are you familiar with this?
I haven't read the study. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it was an article in the Guardian, the newspaper, about this
Yeah.
study. So I didn't get into the details of the study, but it said that there's certainly a greater sense of well-being when people are video gaming, and that up to 4 hours a day, at least in some initial kind of data, seem to not have seem to be good. I mean, seem to be, have not have any real negative consequences. I don't know how they came up with 4 hours, but really the thrust of the article was about trying to bring the video games into the fold of psychology research. That we can't just say, here's the characteristics and not really know what we're talking about in terms of good research. And SMART always supports good research. And having that kind of perspective, but and it also, I noticed it only mentioned 2 games, and they were all age games. One of them was Animal Crossing, and it looks like a pretty young child's game when I checked it out, and also the Plants versus Zombies. Are you familiar with those games?
Yes. Actually, Animal Crossing has a very much typically an older following.
Oh,
which is surprising. It looks very cartoonish, but the game itself is very focused on, built like you have like a little island and a little house, and it's like about decorating that house and, seeing little virtual friends and, going to their little houses and, earning enough money to buy like a little piece of furniture. Like there's not really much of a like traditional game there.
Okay.
It's much more of like a relaxing kind of, building a little house and having a nice little space.
Well, that makes sense, because the study talked about games like that as opposed to other kinds, which they acknowledge could have more negative consequences. But it reminds me of my son joined something called Club Penguin. And that was some years ago. He's 20 now. This is probably when he was under 10. But the same kind of thing. You built your house. He loved having like big stereos in his house. I mean, he must have, I think he had 3 stereos and, and all kinds of TVs. Like he had multiple TVs too. So that was just his interest. But it was social in the extent that he would talk with his friends about, what he got and what they got. And you interact in the game when your friends are online with you.
There's a big social component to a lot of these games, especially now. I mean, I've often wondered if I'd grown up in the next generation up, how my gaming addiction would have been. It would have been worse, or would it have been better? I don't know. But there's a lot more connectivity when it comes to games now. There's a lot of different degrees of addiction. There's a big, I think we're going to see a lot of people struggling with it as time moves on, because it's a massive industry, and there's so many people playing games and different types of games. There's a message board type of thing called Reddit. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. They have a subreddit called Stop Gaming.
Oh, really?
Which helps people try to stop playing video games, or at least tone it down to a point where they can have a healthier relationship. One of the biggest games that comes up over and over again is a game called League of Legends.
Okay.
Which is an online, which I mean, is an overarching thing you could put under like competitive online gaming, being addicted to that, where it's like, it's all about the competition and you have to win. And, if your teammate sucks, then you curse them out. And it's really toxic. And it's just like, I got to win and I got to get to that next level. And I got to be on this different tier. And, I got to go online and look at videos on how to play my character. So I'm doing it right.
YouTube, right. And people's commentary about that.
And like super focused on just like being like playing it right and winning all the time. And, like anyone that tries to get in my way, like screw them, I'm going to curse them out.
Well, so it's a lot of aggression there and criticism. And is that the kind you might be playing with strangers, just someone who has a screen name that you don't necessarily know where they are?
Yeah, because like it's very easy to cuss out a little, text name, or a little voice on the other side that you have no. It's like a road rage thing.
Okay. Okay.
where it's like it's dehumanizing. So like you can just imbue them with all this anger that you want.
Right.
And also it's more so that like you get that addictive mentality of like, how dare you mess with this one thing that I get joy from in this life that I've built of misery, sort of. So it's like, if you mess with my high of like being able to win, like my teammate wasn't good, it's like, I'm going to just be so angry with you.
Yeah, because you've limited yourself to a lot of, judgments about what life means, and the competition has to be won. You're limiting yourself to a certain narrow view of life.
Well, it's all you got at that point, And I used to think about that sometimes when I would be talking with my therapist or other people, and it was like, well, why don't you take the gaming back down and stuff? But you start to think like, how the reaction initially is almost like, how dare you? Like, how dare you take away the one thing that like is giving me happiness in this miserable life I've created for myself?
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't realize that it's the problem,
Yeah.
that
No, you don't. Right. You don't acknowledge that. You don't accept it. And that's Smart's fourth point in the 4-point program is living a healthy and balanced life. Balance being key there. Doesn't mean that there has to be complete turning away. I mean, people have to decide that. They have to go through a process, go to smart recovery meetings perhaps, and talk to other people. But in that subreddit, are there mentions of any kind of mutual support groups or anything like that?
There was one I saw, and I tried to join up with them, but I never got a reply back. There are some out there, I think, if you look online. But initially, the thing that prevented me, first off, was I didn't want to be on the computer. I didn't want to like be. It's like, this is the thing I'm trying to get away from.
Yeah,
like,
right. The screen.
Yeah. But nowadays with Zoom and everything that everyone is doing that, you kind of can't get away from it. And I realized that I was also just using that as a way to avoid getting help, honestly.
Okay.
Something in the back of my mind.
Right.
But there's some out there, and it doesn't, and it's important, I feel like, to note that with Smart, it doesn't necessarily matter what it is you are addicted to. You will find resonance with what other people are going through, and with the tools that are in the handbook.
Right.
One of the big ones, I should mention, one of the big ones for me was that got me away, because with the pandemic that happened, I got into a car accident right before the pandemic, and I was kind of laid up. Yeah, it happens. I got kind of laid up for a while because like I had a broken shoulder and I had to like be, not doing stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like the perfect opportunity to be playing video games all the time.
Right.
And I wore that reason like my little safety blanket. I was like, I'm allowed to game now forever.
Look at me. I'm justified.
Yeah. And I gained like 40 pounds, and I played games all the time, and I did nothing.
Okay.
And the way I got out of it was, they do that smart exercise of like running the tape forward. Before you use, it's like run the tape forward and think, where will that take me? What's going to happen if I do
based on experience where it's going to take you. I mean, you may know well where it's going to take you.
Very well. You know immediately. I mean, most addicts, like, they know immediately as soon as they, like, once they're done with it, how it's going to be. And running the tape forward past just the initial usage, because with video gaming, it was always easy for me to just throw a day away or throw a weekend away. But what about a month, a year, 5 years, 10 years? And that's what gave me enough perspective to take a step back and say, I can't keep throwing my time away on nothing.
Yeah, I'm glad that became the thing that you started to focus on, and using Smart in such a way. Again, as we're wrapping up, anything specific you would tell others, or anything else you want to mention about what's been going on with you?
Well, that also, just to remind people with, that are really into video gaming, that, take a step back and look at how it affects your life. And there are different degrees of, as I was saying, of addiction. And it could just be a behavior that you want to chill out a little bit, take back a couple hours a day or something like that.
Right.
And Smart is available for that. And there is help out there. And you don't have to think of yourself as like an addict. It can just be a behavior that you want to, control more. And
that's
I think that people, like, there's a lot of people out there, not just with gaming, but other behaviors, that they could, if they just have a little bit of perspective and think, okay, well, maybe if I'm a little more conscious about this and use these tools and maybe go to a meeting or two, because you don't have to keep going to meetings. It's not like a 12-step program where you have to go meetings for the rest of your life, So like,
you can use it as a resource. You can use it as
this
a resource.
wonderful tool that Smart is providing for everybody.
Right.
And maybe it'll help your life. It definitely helped mine.
Well, that's really great to hear. I'm so glad. It was a fascinating conversation, Alex. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking so candidly and openly about the kinds of things you've experienced. And I wish you all the best in the future.
Thanks, man. You too.
This YouTube series is made possible by the generous contribution of Insiders Plus members like you. If you're not a member and you'd like to become one, just go to smartrecovery.org/insiders. Thank you.